Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today we're going to talk about how to use a knife safely and how to pick out your first pocket knife. Before we begin, I would like to encourage all of the young men watching this to get their parent to watch the video with them. We'll start off with some safety, then we're going to go into the specifics as to what makes the knives different, and then lastly I'm going to give you some recommendations as to how you can determine which knife is right for you. Knife safety is incredibly important, and we must understand that a knife is a tool just like any other piece of equipment. There are rules to the tools. Now, the first and most important rule is to never cut towards yourself. We always want to cut away from the body. If you are cutting towards yourself and that knife slips, that knife is going to go into your body. And the last thing we want is to cut ourselves or someone else. Now, it's always important to think about where could the knife go if it slipped. If I'm cutting off of a table and the knife slips, could it go into my leg? Spatial awareness. This means understanding what's going on around us and what could happen. Are you standing on solid ground? Because what if you're cutting and your foot slips and you stumble and now you've stabbed yourself in the leg? These are things that are important to think about before you start using a knife. Now let's talk about the different kinds of knives that there are. First and foremost, we have a folding knife with no lock. Now these are popular. However, you have to be extremely careful that you do not apply pressure to the back side of the blade because there is no lock and it will cut your fingers. Next, we've got the Swiss Army knife. Now the Swiss Army knife takes on many shapes and sizes and has a multitude of tools within it. This here is the most basic and the smallest that I have. It has a knife, a file, a pair of scissors built in. It's got tweezers and a toothpick. So for a young man just learning how to use these tools, this is a great place to start. However, it does not have a lock. Now, there are small, medium, and large size Swiss Army knives. I have got 3 examples here, this being the largest that I own. I would say this probably has 20 different tools on it. With pocket knives that fold open, most of them have a lock. If the blade is not locked when you go to cut, what will happen is the blade can close on the fingers and cut your fingers either partially or all the way off. You do not want that. You do not want to be one of those guys walking around missing a finger. Always make sure the knife is fully locked prior to use. Now we will demonstrate how to safely operate the 2 most common styles of lock that you will find on your pocket knife. First and foremost, this is the frame lock. This is by far the most common that you will find, and I want you to pay attention to the frame on this side versus the frame on this side. Notice there is a cutout piece of metal here. What this does is as we open the knife, it allows for that piece of metal to spring and pinch underneath the blade. This causes the blade to stay locked in position, so if I put pressure on the back side, it's not going to go forward. Now to safely disengage this lock and close the knife, I want you to grab from the underside of the blade, not over, underside of the blade. Grab the handle firmly and using your thumb, press down and out. This creates space underneath the blade and allows us to close the knife safely. Be sure to move your fingers out of the way as you close the blade. Now the next most common lock that you'll see is the back lock. The back lock is this little indentation right here. The same fundamentals apply. When the knife is fully opened, you will see that back lock engage. Right there. Now that piece of metal is pinching your blade and keeping it from closing. In order to close this knife safely, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to grasp the blade We're going to pinch the metal in. Notice that piece comes out. It opens up space so that the blade can rotate. Now once the blade is moving, you no longer have to hold down that piece of metal. You can continue to close the knife, moving your fingers out of the way. Moving on from folding knives, we have fixed blades. Now, what I have on my side is a fixed blade. The benefit to having a fixed blade is their durability. Now, as you can see here, there is one solid piece of metal. It gives me immense strength whenever I go to chop or stab. It gives me all that I need in terms of durability. It's not going to break on me like if I were to use a small folding knife to try to do the same job. Okay? Now, don't pry things open with your knife. It's not a crowbar. However, with a large fixed blade, you can get away with some prying. It's bulky, it's not easily concealed, and for most people, it's too much knife. Me personally, I don't even carry this knife anymore because it's just too big. I don't need that much knife, and I'm out here doing work in the woods all day. I prefer a medium-sized knife. Now, for most people, this is not a medium-sized knife. If you were just getting into fixed blades, I would recommend something a little bit more conservative. So as you can see here, there is a great difference between my Bowie knife and my baby Bowie. This would be ideal for someone getting into fixed blades because it's got that piece of metal going across. This means as I'm cutting, I'm not going to jam my hand into anything. It's protecting my hand from whatever it is that I am cutting. When you're starting out, you do not want more knife than you can handle. I would recommend most people start with a small lockback knife. This is going to be the easiest and the safest option. With our knife safety out of the way, let's talk about the different types of blades that you will find. First and foremost is going to be your smooth blade. Now, this does not mean dull. This means it has no sharp teeth. A serrated blade has sharp teeth and allows you to saw. One of the benefits to having a smooth blade is the ability to whittle. Now, whittling is to use your thumb to push against the back of the knife. This is going to give you a lot more leverage. And you do it near the bottom of the blade because that's where you have the most force. This is a useful technique for making an arrow or a spear or any sort of pointed tip for a trap. That gives us a point. It's a lot easier to do that if you do not have those teeth at the bottom of the knife. Because if I wanted to do that same thing with a knife that has teeth on it, I have to use the very tip of the blade, and I don't have as much force going into the cut. Another benefit to having a plain edge on your knife is the ability to sharpen it easily. You don't have to worry about filing each of those teeth individually. You can use a simple sharpening stone and file the entire knife nice and sharp in one go. There you have it. That's how to use a knife safely, what different types of knives there are, the difference between a serrated blade and a standard blade. And since you made it all the way till the end, I'm going to share with you 2 other kinds of knives. Now next, we have a butterfly knife, which is made famous in movies because it just looks cool. Equally as flashy is your switchblade. Now this is cool because it's spring activated, so simply by pressing on that button there, the knife pops up for you and it locks into place. I'm just not a big fan of switchblades for everyday carry, but they are cool to play with. Not saying you should play with knives, but when you understand how to operate them safely, you can admire their engineering.